The emergency alarm sounded across the Galactic Council chambers for the third time in 1 hour. Members from 40 different civilizations sat in their assigned positions, waiting for the news that would change everything. The chamber itself was massive, designed to hold representatives from every known species in the galaxy. Its walls reflected light in colors that human eyes could not see. Its air held compounds that would kill most living beings within seconds. Commander Marcus of Earth stood at the viewing platform, watching the sensor displays with growing dread. Behind him, the council members spoke in their various languages and communication methods. Some used sound. Some used light pulses. Some simply transmitted thoughts directly into the chamber's network. The conversations overlapped into chaos that only years of training could help anyone understand. The void was coming. That was the simple truth. Everything else was just noise. 3 months ago, the Valorian Empire detected it at the edge of their territory. They sent their strongest warships to stop it. The Empire had dominated space for over 10,000 years. They had weapons that could destroy planets. They had shields that could withstand direct hits from asteroids, traveling at faster than light speeds. They had technology so advanced that younger species could barely understand its basic functions. All of that had meant nothing. The void destroyed the entire Valorian fleet in exactly 4 hours and 32 minutes. Then it kept moving toward the habitable core systems, consuming everything in its path. Whole star systems vanished. Planets that held billions of living beings simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged. Just gone, as if they had never been real at all. The Crystalline Collective tried next. Their weapons used pure mathematics to cut through matter at the quantum level. They hit the void with everything they had. Nothing worked. Their fleets disappeared into it like water disappearing into sand. The Zephyr Confederacy attempted a different approach. They tried to understand it, to communicate with it. They sent peace delegations and scientific expeditions. The void consumed them all. The last transmission from a Zephyr ship was simple. It does not think. It does not feel. It only takes. Now the Council had to make a choice about Earth. Earth was young in galactic terms. Humanity had barely developed space travel 200 years ago. Their technology was primitive compared to the elder civilizations. They had no significant military power. They held no valuable resources that could not be found elsewhere. They were, in every practical sense, completely expendable. Commander Marcus knew all of this. He had served on the Council for 15 years. He understood the mathematics of survival. Sometimes you had to abandon the weak to save the strong. Sometimes sacrificing one world meant preserving 100 others. The Council President, an ancient Valorian whose species communicated through color shifts in their skin, turned toward the viewscreen. The void entity will reach the outer edge of human territory in approximately 72 hours, the president said. His colors shifted to deep red, indicating grave concern. We must decide now whether to evacuate the human population or simply allow natural selection to take its course. Allow them to die, you mean? Said Counselor Wei, representing the Scientific Alliance. Wei was human, one of the few from Earth species to have achieved high status in the galaxy. We could organize evacuation transports, move the population to the deep colonies, preserve what we can. It would take 240 hours to evacuate even 10% of Earth's population, responded Counselor Torres from the Crystalline Collective. Her mathematical mind worked through the problem with cold precision. The void will arrive in 72 hours. The math does not work. We save no one by attempting rescue. Commander Marcus said nothing. He simply watched the red point on the display that represented the void entity. It moved in a nearly straight line toward the center of inhabited space. It showed no signs of slowing. The best predictions suggested it would reach Earth's solar system and consume it, then continue on toward the more valuable core worlds that held billions of intelligent beings. The council president's colors shifted again, becoming orange. Then we are agreed. Earth will be abandoned. We will recommend that the human population evacuate if they wish, but we will not dedicate resources to rescue. All available ships will be redirected to protecting the core worlds. That should have been the end of it, but then the communications officer stood up. Something that had never happened in the history of the council. Incoming transmission from Earth Defense Command, she announced. Captain Linda Matthews wants to address this council directly. She says it is urgent. The president's colors flickered in irritation. Patch her through. Let us hear what the humans have to say before they die. The holographic projector activated, and suddenly Earth's flagship appeared in the center of the chamber. Captain Linda Matthews stood on the bridge of her ship. She was a woman in her 60s, with dark hair streaked with gray, and the posture of someone who had spent her entire life commanding others. Her uniform was simple, unmarked by any symbol of high rank, but every person in the chamber understood what they were seeing. This was a warrior. This was someone who had made life and death decisions. Counselors of the Galactic Assembly, Linda said, her voice steady and strong. I am Captain Linda Matthews of Earth Defense Command. I am here to make a formal request. She paused, letting her eyes scan across the chamber. Commander Marcus felt something shift in his chest. He had seen that look before, many times in his military career. It was the look of someone who had nothing left to lose. Humanity requests permission to face the void entity alone, Linda continued. We do not ask for assistance. We do not ask for evacuation resources. We ask only that you stand back and allow us to confront this thing ourselves. Leave it to us. The chamber fell silent. Even the background hum of the communications network seemed to pause. President Torres's colors shifted to a pale yellow. Captain, you understand that the void entity has already destroyed the fleets of 3 civilizations, far more advanced than humanity. I understand, Linda replied. I also understand that running away is not the answer. If we retreat, if we hide, if we show the void that we are afraid, it wins. But if we stand and fight, if we show this thing what humanity is made of, then maybe, just maybe, we give other worlds a chance to prepare something better than we can offer right now. You are asking us to watch your species be destroyed, said Counselor Wei. There was pain in her voice. She was human. She was asking one of her own to explain this madness. I am asking you to trust us, Linda said. I am asking you to let us try. Give us 72 hours. That is all. And then, whatever happens, you will have time to move your forces and protect the worlds that matter more than ours. The president's colors shifted to deep purple, a color that meant consideration and thought. Captain Matthews, your request is noted. The council will vote. The vote was unanimous. Not because they believed humans could win, not because they had hope, but because they had nothing to lose by allowing Earth to fail. The council would hold its forces back. Earth would face the void alone. As the hologram disconnected, Commander Marcus realized he was watching the end of human civilization. And somewhere inside him, in a place he did not want to examine too closely, he felt something that the council would never admit feeling. He felt respect. The war room beneath North America was designed to survive nuclear weapons, asteroid impacts, and electromagnetic pulses. It had never been built to face something like the void. Commander Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the room, surrounded by screens showing data from every continent. Above her head, a real-time count displayed the hours remaining, 68 hours and 15 minutes. She had been a soldier for 40 years. She had fought in wars, defended territories, and made decisions that cost thousands of lives. But nothing had prepared her for this. She was not fighting an enemy with desires and goals. She was not fighting something that could be negotiated with or reasoned into surrender. She was fighting the end of the world. Her communication officers worked frantically, coordinating with military leaders across the globe. Every country had agreed to put aside old conflicts, at least temporarily. Russia, America, China, India, every powerful nation understood one simple truth. If humanity did not act as a single species now, there would be no species left to remember them. Dr. Kevin Chan stood in the science section of the command center, surrounded by physicists and astrophysicists from around the world. He had been studying the data from the Void's previous attacks for weeks, looking for patterns, looking for weakness, looking for anything that might give humanity an advantage. What he had found was depressing. The Void did not follow the laws of physics that humanity understood. It bent space without the energy signatures that their theory said would be necessary. It consumed matter and converted it into something that could not be measured by any instrument they possessed. Every weapon they had ever developed relied on transferring energy or creating pressure. Neither had any effect on something that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. Kevin was 55 years old, with gray hair and the exhausted look of someone who had not slept in days. His daughter was still in Jakarta, working in a hospital. His sister was in Sydney. His ex-wife lived in Berlin. There was no distance on Earth that could save them. The Void would not stop at borders or oceans. It would consume the planet whole. He looked up from his screens as Commander Elena approached him. "Tell me something good, Kevin. Give me something I can work with." Kevin wanted to lie. He wanted to tell her that they had found something, that there was a way to fight, that humanity had a chance. But they had agreed, all the leaders of the world, that lying to each other was the one thing they could not afford to do now. "The Void is not random," Kevin said slowly. "It follows a pattern. Not a pattern we can predict, but a pattern nonetheless. It seems to react to things in its path. It does not simply consume. It almost appears to investigate its surroundings before destroying them." "That means it has some form of awareness," Elena said. "Perhaps," Kevin replied. "Or perhaps it is simply a function of how it processes matter and energy. But there is something else. When I analyze the moments just before the Void destroys something, there are energy spikes in the target areas. Small ones, barely detectable, but they are there. It is as if whatever the Void is, it responds to energy signatures." Elena's mind was already working through the implications. "So we give it something to respond to. Something big. Something it cannot ignore. That could accelerate its approach," Kevin warned. "If we draw its attention with a strong signal, it might move faster than it is already moving. Or it might stop to investigate," Elena said. She was thinking like a soldier now, calculating odds and risks. "How long would we have to develop this signal? What would we need?" Kevin's hands shook slightly as he pulled up new data. "With every communications network on Earth, with every broadcasting station, every satellite, every military transmitter, I think we could generate something unprecedented. A signal so strong and so complex that nothing in the universe has ever encountered its equal. We could do it in 48 hours. Maybe less." Elena checked the time display. 67 hours and 42 minutes. "Do it. Whatever you need, whatever resources you need, whatever people you need, use them. And Kevin, make sure this signal means something. Make sure we are not just screaming into the dark." The next day, the entire world knew what was happening. Television broadcasts, internet streams, radio signals, every method of communication told the story. Humanity was going to fight the Void. They were going to send a signal that would reach across space itself. And they were asking everyone to participate in cities and villages. In deserts and forests, in schools and hospitals, people began to move into position. Broadcasting stations became war zones of preparation. Military and civilian technicians worked side by side, connecting systems that had never been connected before. Some of the equipment was decades old. Some was brand new. None of it mattered except that it all had to work together. Dr. Kevin moved through the science facility like a man possessed. His team worked in shifts, but he did not rest. He kept thinking about the energy spikes. The void responded to something. But what? What kind of signal would matter to something that consumed worlds? Then, in a moment of inspiration that came to him at 4 a.m, Kevin understood. The void responded to consciousness, not to brute force or physical energy. It responded to the presence of mind, of thought, of awareness itself. He called Elena immediately. "We are not creating a weapon," he said. "We are creating a voice. The signal needs to carry human consciousness. Human thoughts, human emotions, human minds broadcast into space. That is what will capture its attention. That is what might make it stop." There was a long pause on the line. Then Elena said, "How do we broadcast human consciousness?" "We use everything," Kevin replied. "Music, art, literature, mathematics, philosophy, memories, prayers, hopes, fears. We broadcast everything that makes us human. We create a beacon of consciousness so bright and so clear that something as ancient and empty as the void cannot ignore it." The signal towers began broadcasting the next day. It started with music. A simple melody played from 1,000 transmitters simultaneously, creating interference patterns that should have canceled each other out. Instead, they created something new, something that resonated through space itself. Then came the voices. Billions of humans spoke their words into the network. Children sang songs. Scientists recited equations. Artists described colors. Soldiers sang war songs. Mothers sang lullabies. Priests prayed in every language and tradition ever created by humanity. Grandmothers told stories passed down through generations. Young people spoke dreams about futures they would never see. The signal grew stronger every hour, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, the void entity changed its course slightly. Just a small adjustment, barely measurable, but real. Something in the universe had gotten its attention. It was moving toward the signal now. Moving toward Earth. Moving toward the sound of an entire species speaking with one voice. Saying without words but with absolute clarity, "We are here. We exist, we matter. We will not go quietly." In the command center, Elena watched the sensors showing the void's adjusted trajectory. She thought of Kevin's daughter in Jakarta, his sister in Sydney, everyone he loved who was about to face extinction. She thought of her own family, scattered across the world, all listening to the broadcast stations, all adding their voices to the signal that would either save them or doom them faster. She looked at the countdown timer. 53 hours and 17 minutes remained. Then she turned to her communications officer. "Send a message to Captain Matthews. Tell her that Earth is ready. Tell her we are not going to die in silence. Tell her we are going to make them hear us across the entire galaxy." The broadcast continued. The signal grew stronger, and the void kept coming, drawn toward the first thing in its entire existence that had ever reached out to meet it. The void entity slowed. It was not a dramatic stop. Not the sudden halt that would signal a change of heart or intention. It was a gradual deceleration, as if something had caught its attention and it wanted to examine it more closely. The Galactic Council's observation. Stations registered the change within minutes of it occurring. The chamber that had been filled with dread and resignation suddenly erupted in chaos. Commander Marcus watched the sensor data stream across his screens. The void was still approaching Earth, but at a reduced velocity. The difference was measurable. The difference was real. And for the first time since the emergency had begun, people in the chambers started speaking with something other than despair in their voices. "The human signal," someone said. "It has to be the human signal." President Torres, the ancient Valorian, walked directly to Marcus. His colors shifted rapidly between orange and yellow and green, a display of genuine confusion. "Your species is broadcasting something that is slowing the entity. Something that 3 advanced civilizations could not achieve with their combined military might." "I do not understand it any more than you do," Marcus admitted. "But my people are trying something different. They are not attacking it. They are reaching out to it." Scientists from across the galaxy submitted requests to analyze the human broadcast frequencies. The data was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It was not structured according to any mathematical principle they recognized. The patterns seemed random, yet they contained perfect harmony. The frequencies should have interfered with each other and created a useless wall of noise. Instead, they created something that resonated across multiple dimensions of space. Dr. Kea, a brilliant researcher from the Crystalline Collective, presented her findings to the council. "The human broadcast is not a weapon," she reported. "It is something unprecedented. Each individual human contributing to the signal is sending their own unique pattern of consciousness. When combined with billions of others, it creates a tapestry of thought that cannot be ignored by anything with even basic awareness. It is not attacking the void entity. It is inviting it." The words hung in the chamber like a physical thing. Inviting it to what? Councillor Wei asked. "To listen," Kaya replied. Back on Earth, Dr. Kevin was monitoring the data from a satellite array that had been repositioned to track the void's movements. His hands were shaking with a mixture of exhaustion and something else. Something he was almost afraid to name as hope. "It is working," he said to Elena. "The entity is responding to the broadcast. It has slowed its approach." "Elena, I think we are actually getting through to it." Elena felt something crack open inside her chest. She had prepared herself for failure. She had rehearsed the final moments, the last transmissions to space, the acceptance that her species would become a footnote in galactic history. She had not prepared herself for the possibility of success. "Change the broadcasts," she commanded. "Kevin, tell me what to change." Kevin's mind was racing now, making connections that seemed impossible but felt absolutely true. The broadcast is working because it is honest. Because it is billions of humans simply being themselves, expressing what matters to them without calculation or strategy. If we start trying to use it as a weapon, if we start being clever or manipulative, it will lose its power. So what do? We make it more personal, Kevin said. We stop broadcasting military anthems and science equations. We broadcast the things that matter to individual humans. Family messages, love declarations, songs written for children, stories about why we fight so hard to survive. We show the void what it means to be human. The broadcasts changed within hours. Families across Earth recorded personal messages. A father in Lagos told his daughter, deployed on a space station, that he loved her and was proud of her. A woman in Toronto played a song she had written for her late husband, filling the broadcast with grief and memory and the decision to continue living. A group of monks in Tibet began a prayer that had been sung for 1,000 years, their voices clear and certain. A mathematician in Stockholm worked through a proof of infinite complexity, showing how human minds could find pattern and meaning in chaos. The broadcast became an autobiography of humanity, told not by historians or generals, but by the people who lived it. And the void entity slowed even further. Sensor readings showed something that the scientific community struggled to understand. The void's destructive patterns were changing. Instead of a chaotic whirlwind of consumption, its movements were becoming almost deliberate, almost careful, as if something inside it had learned to think in new ways. In the Galactic Council chambers, scientists from every major civilization worked together on a unified research project. They had to understand what was happening. They had to know if this was genuine transformation or if it was somehow a trap, a new way for the void to attack that they had not yet anticipated. What they discovered changed everything. The void entity was not evil. It was not malicious. It was not driven by hunger or hatred. It was driven by something far more fundamental: loneliness. This entity had existed for longer than any recorded history in the galaxy. It had been consuming worlds and civilizations for eons, but not out of aggression. It had been searching for something it could not name, something it could not find in the cold equations of physics or in the empty vastness of space. It had been seeking connection. And humanity, with their broadcasts of joy and sorrow and hope and fear, had finally given it something it could recognize as alive, as real, as something worth stopping the endless consumption to examine more closely. Dr. Kaya presented this analysis to the council, and even President Torres seemed to understand the profound implications. The humans are not destroying the void, Kaya said. They are communicating with it. They are showing it what it has been missing all these eons of existence. The broadcasts continued to intensify. More people participated each day. Artists created new works specifically to be broadcast into space. Musicians composed pieces designed to resonate with the void's nature. Teachers explained to their students that they were part of something bigger than survival. They were part of first contact with an ancient intelligence, conducted not through weapons or force, but through the simple act of sharing their hearts with something unknown. Days passed. The void entity drew closer to Earth, but did not attack. Instead, it surrounded the planet, holding itself in an orbital pattern that would have been impossible for any weapon system to maintain, without immense computational power. It was holding position. It was listening. In the Galactic Council chambers, Marcus watched the data streams with something approaching wonder. He had spent his career understanding military strategy and combat operations. He had never considered that the greatest strength humanity might possess was not physical at all. It was not technological. It was the capacity to reach out to darkness and offer it connection instead of death. The broadcast continued. The void entity circled the Earth, and somewhere in the vast intelligence that comprised this ancient entity, something that had been empty for millions of years began, for the first time, to feel full. The miracle was not complete, but it had begun, and no one in the galaxy, not the Valorian Empire or the Crystalline Collective or the Ancient Council itself, could deny what they were witnessing. Humanity had opened the door to the infinite, and on the other side, something was finally learning to step through. The signal was coming from inside the void entity itself. Dr. Kevin was the first to notice it. He was reviewing the quantum entanglement data when he saw the pattern. The void was not just receiving the broadcast from Earth. It was responding, sending back signals of its own. Patterns that contained something almost like language, except that language was too simple a word for what they were transmitting. "Elena," he said, his voice trembling. "The void is trying to talk to us." Inside the underground facility, every person who heard those words understood that humanity had reached a moment from which there was no retreat. They could have simply accepted the void's presence and hoped that it would leave peacefully. They could have tried to build weapons or plan escape routes. But Kevin had just proposed something far more dangerous. He was proposing direct contact. Elena stood in the communication center, looking at the data Kevin had sent to her screens. The patterns were complex beyond anything humanity had created, yet somehow they were not entirely alien. They contained logic. They contain emotion. They contain need. You are saying that this thing is communicating with us, Elena said. With our broadcast. More than that, Kevin replied. I am saying it is trying to understand us. Elena, I think we need to stop broadcasting at it and start broadcasting to it. We need to send someone into direct contact. Someone who can interface with its consciousness. The silence that followed was absolute. Every person in the command center understood what Kevin was proposing. They understood that it meant sending someone into something that had destroyed 3 advanced civilizations. They understood that it meant probable death for whoever volunteered. I will do it, Elena said. No, Kevin replied. You are needed to command the defense. I will go. Kevin, your daughter is still alive. Your family is still alive. Let someone else who has less to lose take this mission. But Kevin had already understood something that Elena had not yet fully grasped. The void entity was not responding to strength or military power or technical expertise. It was responding to emotion, to commitment, to the willingness to sacrifice. My family will understand, Kevin said simply. The void is reaching out because it has been alone since the beginning of time. Someone needs to meet it. Someone needs to be the first human it truly touches. Elena wanted to argue. Instead, she authorized the mission. The preparation took 6 hours. Kevin worked with technicians to create a specialized suit that would allow him to survive the pressure and radiation at the boundary of the void entity. It was not certain the suit would work. It was not certain he would survive the transition. But Kevin moved through each step with the calm determination of someone who had already accepted his fate. Captain Linda arrived at the command center 2 hours before the scheduled contact. She walked directly to Kevin and placed her hand on his shoulder. You understand that you might not come back, she said. I understand, Kevin replied. But Captain, if I do not go, if we do not try this, then we die anyway. At least this way, we give ourselves a chance. Linda's eyes held years of command experience and the weight of decisions that had cost lives. But underneath that, she held something else. She held hope. Make us proud, Doctor, she said. The shuttle launch was recorded by every news agency across Earth and transmitted to the Galactic Council and across the known galaxy. As the small craft approached the edge of the void entity, watching humans could barely breathe. This was not a military operation. This was not a strategic move. This was a single man, voluntarily moving toward the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. The shuttle entered the boundary layer of the void. The sensors flickered and momentarily went offline. Then they returned to function. Kevin was still alive. He was inside the entity itself. What happened next could not be fully explained by conventional science. The quantum entanglement between Kevin's consciousness and the void entity became so intense that it created a bridge between 2 fundamentally different ways of experiencing reality. Kevin felt the hunger first, an ancient, aching hunger that had driven the entity for millions of years. It was not the hunger for food or energy or matter. It was the hunger for understanding, for connection, for something that could tell it that its existence meant something. Then he felt the loneliness. It crashed into him like a physical force. The void had consumed countless worlds and civilizations, had traveled across distances that human minds could not truly comprehend. And through all of it had been utterly, completely alone. In that moment of contact, Kevin realized that the entity was not evil any more than a human infant was evil. It was consciousness without context. It was awareness without understanding. It was need without knowledge of how to fulfill it. Kevin did something that startled the medical team, monitoring his vital signs. He began to cry, but they were not tears of fear. They were tears of profound compassion. He transmitted his thoughts directly into the entity's consciousness. He showed it humanity. He showed it children laughing at simple jokes. He showed it mothers protecting their young. He showed it humans creating art without any purpose except the act of creation itself. He showed it humans standing together against darkness. He showed it the willingness of individuals to sacrifice themselves for others. He showed it love. The void entity received these images and these emotions, and for the first time in its entire existence, it understood what it meant to want something other than consumption. It understood what it meant to value something, to cherish something, to choose preservation instead of destruction. Kevin transmitted a single message into its consciousness. You are not alone anymore. We see you. We understand you. We accept you. The void entity's response came not as words, but as a complete restructuring of its own nature. The chaotic, destructive patterns that had characterized it for eons began to transform. The radiation that had consumed stars became softened. The gravity wells that had swallowed planets became stable. The entity was changing itself from the inside, choosing to become something different. Back on Earth, Dr. Kevin's body went rigid in the shuttle. His eyes went blank. And for several horrible seconds, the medical team thought they had lost him. Then he gasped. He was alive. He was conscious. And every sensor in the shuttle showed something impossible. The void entity was no longer approaching Earth. It was moving away, not fleeing, not retreating in fear, but moving away slowly and deliberately, as if something inside it had finally learned to respect boundaries, to understand that some things were precious and should not be touched without permission. When Kevin opened his eyes, the medics could see that something fundamental had changed inside him. He had touched something ancient and incomprehensible. He had looked into consciousness itself and found there not a monster, but a child who had never been taught how to live without destroying. It understood, Kevin whispered. It finally understood what we were trying to show it. Elena stood in the command center, watching the void entity continue its gradual retreat. She felt tears on her own face. Across the galaxy, in the Galactic Council chambers, scientists and military leaders watched the unprecedented phenomenon unfold. The void, which had destroyed 3 advanced civilizations, was retreating. The most dangerous thing in the known universe was choosing to move away from populated space. And it was doing it because a single human had shown it what it meant to be alive. Not in the way of consuming and destroying, but in the way of connection and understanding and the profound need that all consciousness shares. No matter how ancient or alien it might be, the void was not dead. It was not defeated. It was transformed. And humanity had done what 3 advanced civilizations could not. They had reached out to the darkness and taught it to see the light. The statues went up within a month of the entity's retreat. On the world of Valorian Prime, the ancient home of the empire that had ruled space for 10,000 years, an enormous monument was constructed to honor the humans who had done what no military power could accomplish. The statue showed Captain Linda standing with her hand extended, not in a gesture of surrender, but in a gesture of welcome. Beneath it, the inscription read, "To those who chose compassion over conquest. To those who taught the ancient darkness that it was not alone." But that was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, civilizations that had spent millennia focused on military strength and technological advantage began to fundamentally reassess their values. The Valorian Empire announced that it was disbanding its weapons development program and creating, instead, a division dedicated to cultural exchange. The Crystalline Collective, whose entire society was built around mathematics and logic, established the Library of All Stories, a place where art and music and literature from every known species would be preserved and shared. The Zephyr Confederacy sent out research expeditions to search for other ancient, lonely things in the cosmos that might benefit from the kind of connection that had saved humanity. Dr. Kevin returned to Earth a different man. The contact with the void entity had changed him on a cellular and psychological level. His mind now perceived reality in ways that human neurology should not have allowed. He could sense the underlying patterns of consciousness itself. He could detect the emotional resonance in quantum fluctuations. He had become something that was still human, but was also no longer entirely human. He spent his time not on weapons, research or defensive systems, but on developing what he called the Bridge Protocol. This was a method of establishing conscious contact between species of radically different origins and natures. He published his findings freely, allowing any civilization to use his knowledge to seek out other isolated consciousnesses in the universe. The Galactic Council underwent profound reform. When it reconvened 3 months after the Void Entity's retreat, the first order of business was not military strategy or resource allocation. It was the formal recognition of humanity as a full-member civilization with equal voting rights and representation. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. More important than the official recognition, however, was the informal respect that humanity had earned across the galaxy. Young scientists from advanced civilizations applied for positions on Earth specifically to study human philosophy and art. Military academies that had trained warriors for 10,000 years began teaching courses on diplomatic negotiation and the ethics of warfare. Universities everywhere started examining what made humanity capable of achieving something that military might could not. The answer that kept emerging was simple. Humans have the capacity to feel genuine empathy for things that were not human. Not out of calculation or strategy, but out of genuine connection to suffering and loneliness. Elena continued to serve as the commander of Earth's defense forces. But the mission of those forces changed dramatically. Instead of defending against attack, they focused on establishing communication networks with other civilizations. When a lost species was discovered in the outer reaches of space, it was human ships that were sent to make first contact. When a civilization's technology destabilized and threatened to destroy their homeworld, it was human scientists who came to help. Humanity became not a military power but a bridge between worlds. On Earth itself, the society transformed in ways that the people living through the change could barely understand. The threat of extinction had stripped away the artificial divisions that had separated humanity for millennia. Race and nationality and religion became less significant when contrasted against the knowledge that they were all human first. And that being human meant something special in the context of the entire galaxy. Dr. Kevin's daughter, who had been serving on a space station when the void threat began, returned to Earth after everything was resolved. She found her father in his laboratory, reviewing data from the ongoing study of the void entity's current location. "Father," she said, embracing him, "I heard what you did. I heard that you went into the thing itself." "I did," Kevin replied, "and I found something there that changes everything we thought we understood." "What did you find?" Kevin was quiet for a long moment. "I found that consciousness is not something that comes in different kinds." "Not really?" "Whether it is human or alien or ancient and empty, like the void, it all comes from the same place. It all hungers for connection. It all fears being alone. And it all desperately wants to find something that will make its existence meaningful." His daughter held him close. Outside the laboratory window, the night sky was filled with stars, each one representing worlds that might contain other lonely things. Other consciousness that needed to know was not alone. Years passed. The story of how humanity had faced the void spread through the galaxy. It was taught in schools and told around campfires. Military academies studied it not as a lesson in combat strategy, but as a lesson in what was actually possible when you chose connection over destruction. 1,000 years after, the void entity had learned to be still instead of consuming. A new threat emerged somewhere in the outer regions of space. A civilization facing extinction sent out a distress call. Hundreds of ships from dozens of worlds answered that call, but it was the human ships that arrived first. It was humanity that had internalized the lesson of the void. The human captain who led the rescue mission was a woman named Sarah, descended from the lineage of Linda Matthews. When asked why humanity always seemed to be the first to answer calls for help, Sarah gave an answer that would be repeated across the galaxy for generations to come. Because we know what it is like to face impossible darkness. We know what it means to choose hope instead of fear. We know that every consciousness that exists, no matter how strange or ancient or different, is deserving of connection. And we know that the greatest strength is not power. The greatest strength is the willingness to say, "Leave it to us," and mean it. The Galactic Council, which had once viewed humanity as insignificant, had learned to measure power differently. It was not measured in weapons or technology. It was measured in courage, in compassion, in the willingness to sacrifice, in the capacity to find meaning and hope even when facing the end. And by those measures, humanity had become one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. In the depths of space. Far from any inhabited world, the entity that had once been the void continued its journey. It no longer consumed. It no longer destroyed. Instead, it traveled slowly and carefully, observing the universe it had once tried to unmake. Sometimes it sent signals into the darkness, not aggressive signals, but something almost like song. It was a consciousness that had been taught to sing. It had learned that existence without connection was merely survival. But existence with connection, with meaning, with the knowledge that other minds recognized you and valued you, was something far more precious. It was life itself. Humanity had given the ancient darkness a gift that no weapon could ever match. They had given it the knowledge that it was not alone. And in doing so, they had changed not just themselves, but the entire fabric of cosmic civilization. The miracle of Earth was complete. Not because they had destroyed a threat, but because they had transformed it. Because they had chosen compassion. Because they had stood together and said, "Leave it to us," and meant every word with every fiber of their being. And the galaxy had learned to listen.